So today guys, I have another prediction video. Today we are going to be going ahead and predicting the Premier League for what I think is going to happen this season. And I'm almost certainly going to be wrong with most of these predictions. I'll go ahead and react to this video at the end of the season, and I'll also be reacting to some of your comments in the comments down below. So let me know down below, what do you think is going to happen in the Premier League this year? Who do you think is going to be relegated, and who do you think is going to win the title? And how do you think the newly promoted teams will do as well? As well as that, you guys can also go ahead and join my fantasy football league for the Premier League Fantasy Football. I'll leave a link in the description down below to the website that you guys can go ahead and join. And I'll also leave the league code that you can go ahead and copy and paste to go ahead and join the Ben HD YouTube League for the Premier League Fantasy Football. As you can see on screen now guys, that is my team that I'm going with for the start of the season. Let me know down below if you rate that team or not. I think it looks alright, to be honest. So for this prediction video, we're going to be going ahead and starting at the bottom of the Premier League and then working our way upwards. So I'm happy to be proven wrong with any of these really. I think my Premier League prediction video last year was a bit of a disaster. I had some very dodgy shouts in there, so I'm not anticipating to get all of these right, and like I said, I'm happy to be proven wrong with any of them. So coming in 20th place, we are going to have Cardiff City. Now, I feel like this will be the obvious choice. A lot of people will be putting Cardiff at the bottom of the Premier League. I have a couple of reasons why I'm going to go ahead and put them there. I think when you look at that Cardiff squad, they have a lot of players who you would consider to be championship players, and a lot of them are seriously going to need to step up this season if they are going to go ahead and avoid the Premier League drop this year. If you look at their incomings, they've brought in, all their players have come from the Championship this year. They brought in Josh Murphy, Bobby Reid, Alex Smithies and Greg Cunningham. I've got a bit of a soft spot for Cardiff because of course they have signed Greg Cunningham. He was a terrific left back for Preston and does deserve his chance at the Premier League, so I do hope to see him do well this season. Bobby Reid, of course, last season for Bristol City, scoring over 20 goals for them in the Championship. It'll be interesting to see if he can make the transition up. Josh Murphy, I'm not convinced he's ready for the Premier League, that's my opinion. Defensively, I think they'll make themselves very tough to break down. You know, this is a Neil Warnock side. Never done it in the Premier League before, but I think this is a new start for him at Cardiff. He's got the team he wants, and so it's a clean slate for Neil Warnock in the Premier League, in my opinion. The only thing that concerns me with this Cardiff side is I don't think they'll score enough goals this season. Fair play if they prove me wrong, but players like Junior Hoylett, Kenneth Zahore and Bobby Reid are really going to have big seasons if they are going to avoid the drop. So I'm saying Cardiff in 20th. Then coming in at 19th and next to be relegated, we are going to have Huddersfield Town. Now, I do hope that they prove me wrong with this one. I would like to see Huddersfield survive another year in the Premier League. Last time in the Premier League, with my last prediction video, I did actually predict Huddersfield to go ahead and survive, so fair play for proving me right with that one. The only thing that concerns me with this Huddersfield side is, once again, similar to Cardiff, I don't feel like they're going to score enough goals like this season. Last season, they were the joint lowest scorers in the Premier League with Swansea City, who of course were relegated, only going ahead and scoring 28 goals. When you look at some of the business that they've done in this transfer window, they're going to need some of their new signs to come in big for them. They've brought in a couple of players from Monaco, one of them being a striker, so he'll need to hit the ground running for them. Huddersfield, they do have quality in this team, and they are good enough to survive. You know, David Wagner's a terrific manager. I'm going to say 19th, although I hope to be proven wrong. Then going in 18th, and the last team to be relegated is going to be Southampton. This may be a bit of a controversial shout from me, but once again, I have a couple of reasons why I'm going to say this. If you look at the core group of players that Southampton have, they've got some very talented players in there, but I just feel like something is fundamentally wrong with the club over the last few years, whether it's a mentality issue or a lack of leadership. I feel like some of their big players have been underperforming recently, and I feel like under Mark Hughes, who's not completely convinced me he's the right man in the long term for Southampton, I feel like this season may be a long year for them. Obviously, some of their creative players have left in this transfer window. We've seen the likes of Tadic and Buffon go ahead and leave. El Yunusi has come in as a winger who does excite me. I'd like to see what he can do in the Premier League, but for Southampton, they're going to need players like Charlie Austin to really go ahead and have a big season for them, and I could be way off with that prediction, but I'm going to say 18th. In our 17th and just avoiding relegation, we are going to have Brighton. Now, Brighton last season went ahead and had a terrific year in the Premier League, of course. Chris Hughton going ahead and guiding them to Premier League survival, and I do fancy them to go ahead and survive another year in the Premier League. I feel like they will be in and around that bracket, in and around the relegation zone, but some of the players they've gone ahead and brought in this transfer window have fairly impressed me. One player who I'm really looking forward to seeing is the new Iranian winger who they brought in from AZ Alkmaar. I'm not even going to try and pronounce his name because I would completely butcher it, but he comes in with quite a high reputation, and I'm excited to see what he can do in the Premier League. Coming in next, we are then going to have Watford. Last season in the Premier League, Watford had a really topsy-turvy season. They went ahead and started the year really well under Marco Silva, of course, and then as soon as he was linked with the Everton job, things just started to derail for them, really. Of course, they went ahead and then sacked him, brought in Javi Garcia, and it wouldn't surprise me if Javi Garcia was going to be sacked by Watford this season because they go through managers like it's going out of fashion, really. But looking over that Watford squad, I think it will be good enough to survive another year in the Premier League. I don't necessarily think they're going to set the world alight, but looking at some of the players they've brought in so far, Deulofeu, I think, will be a positive addition if he can stay consistent. As well as that, they're also being linked with Paco Alcacer of Barcelona at this point in time. If he was brought in, that would be a good acquisition. At 15th, we are then going to have Newcastle United, and Newcastle are a team who I feel a bit sorry for, really. I feel a bit sorry for Rafa Benitez, really. I was watching one of his interviews after one of their pre-season friendlies, and he just seemed really depressed about the whole situation around Newcastle at the moment. Newcastle fans not being happy with Mike Ashley. They are just going for budget buys everywhere at the moment, and with some of the players they've sold in recent years and the money that he's putting back into the club and into transfers, it's non-comparable, really. In this transfer window, they signed the likes of Key coming in from Swansea, Rondon's coming in on a loan, and they signed a couple players from the Bundesliga as well. But with the budget that Rafa Benitez is working with at Newcastle at the moment, he'll make Newcastle a very hard team to break down, but they're not going to get onto that next level until they seriously invest some money into that team. So as good as Newcastle are and as good as Benitez is, I feel like it'll be around about 15th for them. I think being in 14th place, we are going to have Burnley, and I'm predicting them to have a bit of a drop-off from where they finished last season, of course. Last season, an absolutely incredible season for Burnley, and it does pain me a little bit as a Preston fan, but they were absolutely magnificent under Sean Dyche in the Premier League. This season, though, having that extra game every week of the Europa League, if they do make it through all the qualifying rounds, I think that will see Burnley have a bit of a drop-off in the Premier League. Their squad overall isn't the deepest. It's a little bit thin at the moment in terms of first-team quality, and they've not been the busiest side in the transfer window. They've gone ahead and signed Ben Gibson and Joe Hart so far, so they've gone ahead and bolstered their defence where they were already very strong, but it's scoring goals where Burnley were probably the weakest last season. They only went ahead and scored 36 goals last season, which is only one more than Stoke City, who were, of course, relegated in the end. In our 13th place, we're then going to have Bournemouth. I really rate Bournemouth and the work that Eddie Howe has been able to do there over the last few years. They've established themselves as a solid Premier League club, and I think that will continue going into this season. If you look over their squad, one area where you probably identify perhaps as a weakness for them would be centre midfield, but it's looking likely at the moment that they are going to complete the signing of Jefferson Lerma coming in as a Colombian holding midfielder who is actually quite highly rated coming in from La Liga. And if you look at the current players that Bournemouth have in that team, it's a very hard working squad, and they've also got people going forward who can score goals, the likes of Callum Wilson and Josh King, who I fancy will have a good season for them. And for Bournemouth, I think it'll be around about 13. Then in at 12th, we are going to have Fulham on their return to the Premier League. One team who I really do fancy to have a terrific year back in the Premier League. If you look at the way they played last season in the Championship, I think they will cause a lot of teams problems going forward into this season. If you look at their transfer business they've done so far in the window as well, it's been very impressive for a newly promoted club. The likes of Seri coming in will be an absolutely phenomenal player for them. Also, Andre Schürrle comes in as quite a high-profile player. Looking over his last few years at Dortmund, he's not really had the best of seasons for them, so I don't necessarily think that he's going to completely walk into that first team for Fulham. I think he's going to have to prove himself as a Premier League starter for them, but they've got some very good options going forward this season. Also completing the permanent signing of Mitrovic. I think he was never really given a fair chance in the Premier League for Newcastle, but the way that Fulham play and they sort of play around him with the two wingers going forward who like to play off him, I really fancy Mitrovic to have a good year for them in the Premier League this season. So for Fulham this season, I'm going to go ahead and say they will finish 12th. I think they'll score a ton of goals this season. In at 11th place, we are going to have Crystal Palace. I've got to say I was pleasantly surprised by how well Roy Hodgson did last season for them, really. When he went ahead and came in at Palace, I thought that his time in England will have just finished him off, really, and I thought that Palace were doomed. But in fairness to him, he made them quite a hard side to beat, and they played quite well on the counter-attack, obviously. Their big incoming this season is going to be Max Meyer arriving on a free deal for them. If he can really go ahead and hit it off and show his full potential for Crystal Palace, he can be linking up with players going forward like Wilfried Zaha, who I'm guessing will get into double figures for Palace this season, playing as a striker. I think they'll have a good season this year on the Hodgson. I'm going to say 11th. They're going to be in the middle of the Premier League in 10th position. I'm going to go ahead and back Wolves to go ahead and get a top 10 finish. I think that under Nuno in the Premier League this season, Wolves will surprise a lot of people. Watching them last season in the Championship, it was obvious fairly early on that they were going to go ahead and boss that league, and making this step up to the Premier League, I think they've got players in there who will comfortably make that step up. Last season in the Championship, they went ahead and scored 82 goals, and when you look at some of their attacking options, I'm really excited to see how they go ahead and get on in the Premier League. The likes of Diogo Jota, Raul Jimenez, Helder Costa and Ivan Cavallero, as well as that, it also looks like they're going to go ahead and complete the signing of Adama Traore arriving from Middlesbrough. You could argue that he still perhaps lacks a final product, but his pace and power going forward, I think will really go ahead and supplement this Wolves attacking line, and the amount of pace that they're able to break with, as well as that they've got quality in behind for players like João Moutinho and Ruben Neves, who I think will comfortably make the step up to the Premier League. And they have a solid back five with Rui Patricio, an international goalkeeper, in there. I really do think that Wolves are set up for a very good season in the Premier League. The only thing that surprised me with Wolves really was that they were willing to let go of Barry Douglas, who I thought was excellent in the Championship. But apart from that, I think Wolves are going to have a very good year. In that ninth, we are then going to have Everton. Under Marco Silva this season, I fancy them to have a pretty good year, of course. Their big incoming being Richarlison, and quite a lot is being made of that transfer. Of course, it was a big money move for a player who probably only had one half of a good season last time. You know, I think he only scored 5 goals and got 4 assists. But as a player with potential, I think that Everton were in need of more creativity and more flair and pace going forward. I think that'll serve them well this season. If he's able to get the best out of players like Gylfi Sigurdsson, Tosun and Idrissa Gueye, I think that Everton will be set up for a fairly good year. At the moment, they're also being linked to Bernard, another Brazilian winger who could be coming into Everton. So overall, I feel like Everton will be around about 9th. Although, it does have to be said that pre-season they've not looked the best. Then coming in 8th position, we are going to have Leicester City. If you look at the spine of players who Leicester have at their disposal, it's a very talented Premier League team. Schmeichel, Maguire, Ndidi and Vardy, that's quality right down there. And when you look at some of their new additions, the likes of James Maddison last season in the Championship for Norwich, going ahead and scoring 14 goals and picking up 8 assists. I think that him and Vardy and Demarai Gray can form a really good partnership this year. I think they'll score goals, and defensively they're looking quite strong. So for Leicester, I'll say 8th. Then in that 7th, we are going to have West Ham United. And for West Ham this season, with some of their new additions and the fact that they got a very capable manager in Manuel Pellegrini, I do fancy West Ham to have a very successful season. Looking at some of their additions, they've signed the likes of Felipe Anderson, Yarmolenko, Fabianski, Jack Wilshere and Ryan Fredericks. I think that this West Ham squad is looking very good. As well as that, I also fancy Arnautovic to have a very big season for them. Myself being a Preston fan, that Preston played West Ham in pre-season. We drew 2-2 with them at Deepdale, but Arnautovic is just on a completely different level. And when his mindset is right, he can be an absolutely clinical goal scorer in the Premier League. So for West Ham this year, I fancy them to go ahead and finish 7th. I think they're set up for a good year. Now moving on into the top 6, this is where I'm almost certainly going to get all of these wrong, and these are going to be in completely the wrong order. But in my opinion, coming in 6th position, we are actually going to have Chelsea. Now, I have a couple of reasons for this. If you look at their transfer window last time in the Premier League, they brought in some very average players. The likes of Bakayoko, Ross Barkley, Danny Drinkwater, Zappa Costa, and even to a certain extent Morata. Chelsea's transfer business at the moment hasn't been very savvy, of course. In this window, they've only brought in one player so far, that being Jorginho, who I think will have a good year for them. They brought in Rob Green as well, but we won't really class that as a signing. I think that long-term, Sarri will be the right manager for Chelsea, but I don't think it will be fair to judge him off this season alone, really, you know, if it isn't a success for them, because this isn't his team. This is still very much an Antonio Conte team. They're also going to have Europa League football to play this season, which can be an absolute slog, playing on Thursday then Sunday. I feel like that will hamper Chelsea's chances this season of making the top 4 in the Premier League. They can begin in 5th place, and just missing out on 4th position, we are going to have Arsenal. I feel like under Unai Emery, they will show a big improvement from last season. Scoring goals last season wasn't really a problem for Arsenal. They went ahead and scored 74, which was actually only behind Man City and Liverpool. The problem with Arsenal last season was, of course, their away record and conceding goals. In this transfer window, Emery's looked to go ahead and address that, bringing in Leno, Socrates and Lichtsteiner as new players coming in those positions. They also went ahead and signed Torreira coming in as a holding midfielder. I fancy him to have a good year for them, and if they can get the best out of both Aubameyang and Lacazette in the same system, then Arsenal really could be onto a winner this season. Defensively, I still feel like they'll have a couple of cracks in there, and the fact that this Arsenal squad's mentality was so wrong in the past few years under Wenger, I feel like it may take Unai Emery a couple of years to really go ahead and find the right formula. But for Arsenal, I think it'll be an improvement. I'm going to say 5th. I think being in 4th position and just making it into the first Champions League spot, we are going to have Spurs. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be predicting Tottenham to finish outside the top 4 this season. The main reason for that being that they've not actually signed anyone in the transfer window so far, and it is typical Spurs to go ahead and sign people late on in the transfer window, so we'll see if anything happens on transfer deadline day for them. But the current group of players that Spurs have in that team, I think, is good enough to make the top 4. The last 3 years, they've made the top 4 very comfortably, and I don't think it'll be a drastic fall off this season. Harry Kane's probably going to go ahead and score another 20 or 30 goals this season. They've got players in there behind like Eriksen, Ali and Son, and then they've got a great midfield and strong defence. So for Spurs, I'm going to say 4th. Coming in 3rd position, we are then going to have Manchester United, and Man United this season are a team who really could go either way. I feel like this could be the season when Mourinho absolutely implodes at Man United and they finish about 10th or something, because listening to some of the stuff he's been saying in pre-season, the guy just seems to have lost it. But looking at that Manchester United team and the type of manager that Mourinho should be, I think they will make the top 4 this season. Their transfer business in this window hasn't exactly blown me away, but looking at the core group of players that they have in that Manchester United team, I do think that they will make the top 4 this season. Alexis Sanchez, I think, will go on to have a big season for them. Lukaku, I fancy to score over 20 goals this season. One player who's a bit of a wild card this season for Man United is going to be Paul Pogba. I really want to see Man United get the best out of him this season. He had a terrific World Cup with France, and I want to see that Paul Pogba for United this season. Going in 2nd position in the Premier League, we are going to have Liverpool. I feel like they will be the team who pushes Man City the closest this season, but I feel like they may just fall a little bit short. Looking at the signings that they brought in this transfer window, they've gone ahead and massively upgraded their midfield with the likes of Fabinho and Keita coming in there. They've got Shaqiri coming in to go ahead and supplement that forward 3 to come on as an impact player, and they've finally gone ahead and addressed their goalkeeping situation, bringing in Alisson. He wasn't cheap in the end, but this is a position where Liverpool have needed to strengthen for God knows how long now. So they've finally gone ahead and got that over the line, and with the type of football they play, you know, they score a lot of goals. They're a very expressive team, press very high up the pitch. Although, as they did finish 25 points behind Man City last season, I don't feel like they'll bridge that gap quite yet. But then to go ahead and win the Premier League for a 2nd season running, it is going to be Manchester City, in my opinion. Finishing last season on 100 points, it is really going to take a monumental job for any of the top 6 to go ahead and catch Man City this season, in my opinion, of course. The only player coming in for Man City so far has been Riyad Mahrez, but he gives their wingers a bit more competition this season. And looking at that Man City squad, they've got depth in every single position. And the philosophy that Guardiola has been able to bring to this Manchester City side means that everyone is just so comfortable on the ball, and that midfield 3 they played with last season of Silva, De Bruyne and Fernandinho is just absolutely fantastic. It's such an efficient way of playing football and is sustainable over a full season, of course. In the Champions League, we did see Liverpool get the better of Man City, but I feel like over a full league season, the way that Man City play is more sustainable than the way Liverpool play. They had the best defence in the league last season, only going ahead and conceding 27 goals, and considering that Mendy is coming back into the first team, he's going to feel like a new signing in themselves. So guys, there you have it. As you can see on screen now, there are my predictions for how I think the Premier League is going to finish for this upcoming year. So do you guys agree or disagree with me? Let me know in the comments down below. As well as that, make sure you guys do go ahead and join my fantasy football league. I'll leave the code in the description down below and a link so you guys can go ahead and sign up. But apart from that, guys, that will now wrap it up for this video. So if you have enjoyed, make sure you do leave a like. Like I said, make sure you do get a comment in the comments down below for who you think is going to win it this year. But apart from that, thank you so much for watching. Make sure you do subscribe for some regular content. But apart from that, guys, I'll see you all in the next one.